High-ranking military officials now admit 3I Atlas may not be what it seems, but something far more terrifying.
A fast-moving object the size of Manhattan is hurtling towards our solar system, and it will make its closest pass to Earth on December 17th. Comet, asteroid, or something else?
Something strange is moving through space, and the Navy knows it.
Maybe they know something and do not want to let us know about it.
While you were sleeping, warships shifted, secret protocols lit up, and deep-sea sonar arrays locked onto something not of this Earth.
The investigator of that camera said that he cannot communicate the information to the public because of the government shutdown.
It's not just a comet, it's changing course, pulsing signals, and, according to leaked Pentagon documents, it might be hollow. And when it disappeared for 3 days, what they found next shocked the world's top scientists. You won't believe what's now orbiting silently above, and possibly beneath us. The quiet deployment. Before sunrise, while most of the country was still asleep, quiet orders began moving through America's naval bases. There were no alarms, no press releases, and no official explanations. Only silent activity spread across the coasts. From Norfolk to Pearl Harbor, ships were changing course. Destroyers, missile defense cruisers, and deep-sea submarines were all repositioning without public notice. At first, it looked like a routine operation, but for people who follow naval movements, the pattern didn't fit. These weren't training exercises or scheduled patrols. Something more serious was underway. The Navy's attention wasn't on another country. It was focused on an object in space known as 3I Atlas. Astronomers had first called it a comet, but new data from advanced telescopes revealed strange behavior. Atlas had changed its path, and updated projections showed that fragments from it could enter the atmosphere and possibly strike the Pacific Ocean. That possibility was enough to put the Navy on alert. If debris hit the water, it could create massive waves or even tsunamis. The Navy's role became clear: protect the coastline, monitor potential impact zones, and prepare for any disaster that might follow. Inside command centers, teams began running non-stop simulations. Naval meteorologists worked closely with Space Command to model possible debris paths and ocean disruptions. Ships were quietly deployed to key areas, while coastal bases reviewed evacuation routes and communication systems. This wasn't about aliens or secret contact. It was about readiness and coordination. The operation was called the Continuity Response Program, a plan that combined space monitoring with ocean disaster response. For years, it had existed only as a contingency. Now, it was active. Old sonar systems from the Cold War were reactivated to detect underwater shock waves or unusual ocean patterns. Every movement had a purpose: to prepare for the worst and maintain stability if the situation escalated. There were no public announcements and no explanations. Everything was done quietly and efficiently to prevent panic. If fragments from Atlas entered the atmosphere, the first signs would not come from the news. They would come from ships leaving port, aircraft changing routes, and an unusual silence across communication networks. By the time the public realized something was happening, the operation would already be in full motion. The hidden warnings from NASA. The first clue that something was wrong with 3I Atlas wasn't its strange orbit, it was its size. Publicly, NASA described Atlas as a harmless comet, roughly 1 kilometer wide. But according to internal analyses and unconfirmed data from the James Webb Telescope, the object appeared far larger, somewhere between 30 and 50 kilometers across. At that scale, a direct impact would be catastrophic, powerful enough to rival the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Yet NASA's public statements stayed calm and minimal, never mentioning the new measurements. Inside the agency, scientists quietly questioned what they were really looking at. Researchers examining the Webb data noticed that Atlas's readings didn't match any known natural object. Its energy patterns were unstable, and its composition appeared metallic in places where ice and dust should have dominated. One team described it as energetically inconsistent, a phrase that raised more questions than answers. Then came the second anomaly, a repeating infrared signal. At first, it looked like background noise, but over time, telescopes kept detecting the same rhythmic pulse, steady and structured. Some analysts thought it might be a glitch. Others weren't so sure. Officially, NASA dismissed the pattern as a sensor error or gas jets from the comet's surface. But internally, the data was labeled as directed emission, a term typically used for communication signals. A few researchers even pointed out that the intervals matched prime numbers, something often seen in attempts to identify intelligent patterns. When these findings reached military channels, the tone changed overnight. Access to telescope data was limited, and independent astronomers noticed their observation feeds slowing down. Online communities began piecing the story together, suggesting that NASA wasn't just hiding what Atlas was, but what it might represent. The rumors grew when reports claimed that Elon Musk had been briefed privately after SpaceX's Starlink network detected strange interference as Atlas drew closer. Musk later posted a cryptic message, "It's bigger than they're telling you," before deleting it hours later. Whether those reports were true or not, one question remained. If the object's size and strange emissions were being downplayed, what was NASA truly afraid of revealing? A primer on comets. Before we begin, a brief primer on comets. They are frozen relics from the birth of our solar system, made of ice, dust, and rock, traveling through space at speeds of up to 150,000 miles per hour. As they approach the sun, the ice begins to vaporize, forming glowing tails that can stretch for millions of miles. Most comets pass harmlessly by, but one the size of a city could release more energy than every nuclear weapon on Earth combined if it struck our planet. That is what makes 3I Atlas different, and why the September 30th meeting was called. To understand the concerns surrounding 3I Atlas, we first need to understand what comets are. Comets are frozen leftovers from the birth of our solar system, made of ice, dust, and rock. As they move closer to the sun, the heat causes their frozen surfaces to vaporize, forming a glowing cloud called a coma. From this coma, long tails of gas and dust can stretch for millions of miles, creating the bright trails we see in the night sky. Comets are more than just celestial objects. They are ancient pieces of the early solar system, and many scientists believe they may have carried the first water and organic materials to Earth. But comets can also be dangerous. They travel at incredible speeds, and their paths can shift suddenly due to the pull of large planets. If one were pushed toward Earth, the impact could be catastrophic. Even a comet of moderate size could release more energy than every nuclear weapon ever created. This is why astronomers track them constantly. The goal is not only discovery, but survival. And that is what made the early data about 3I Atlas so alarming. Inside NASA, scientists began to notice something about this comet that defied every expectation. The unwelcome visitors. 3I Atlas wasn't a normal comet. It was something far stranger, an object from outside our solar system. Most comets travel in predictable loops around the sun, but this one came from deep space, moving so fast that the sun's gravity couldn't pull it into orbit. It was just passing through a true interstellar visitor. Astronomers quickly compared it to Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019, the only other known objects to enter our system from beyond the stars. But Atlas was nothing like them. It was bigger, brighter, and behaving in ways no one could explain. Early readings suggested it could be 30 to 50 kilometers wide, far larger than anything ever seen from deep space. And the way it reflected light didn't match what scientists expected from ice and rock. Some data hinted at metal. Others showed hollow regions inside, almost like empty chambers. Observatories across the world scrambled to study it. The more they watched, the stranger it became. Atlas didn't spin or shed material like a normal comet. It held its shape. It moved steadily. It looked controlled. At first, it was treated as a scientific miracle, a chance to learn about another star system. But as more data arrived, that excitement began to fade. Something about Atlas didn't feel natural, and for the first time, scientists began to wonder, what if it wasn't just passing through? Political firestorm and public reaction. It started with a transmission from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The data was quietly shared with a European observatory, but parts of it were soon posted online. The readings didn't match any known comet, and within hours, the story began spreading across the internet. By the next morning, major news outlets had picked it up. The sudden attention forced Washington to respond. In Congress, several lawmakers demanded immediate answers. Senator Alicia Warren called for a public hearing, saying Americans had the right to know what was entering Earth's skies. Some members of Congress accused NASA and the Pentagon of withholding information. At the White House, officials tried to calm the situation. The press secretary released a short statement, saying the matter was under review and that there was no danger to the public. But behind the scenes, government analysts were already discussing reports of non-gravitational movement, a technical term suggesting that Atlas wasn't behaving like a normal comet. Social media is filled with speculation. Former President Donald Trump claimed it was a cover-up bigger than Roswell. Elon Musk suggested the object's movements looked technologically suggestive. His post was later deleted, but screenshots continued to circulate online. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some people believed Atlas was an alien probe. Others thought it was a weapon or even a warning. Millions tuned into live streams from amateur astronomers trying to spot the object themselves. Soon, the concern spread from online discussions to real life. People living near Navy bases in Norfolk, Virginia, and San Diego reported unusual activity. Ships were redeploying, and residents described night drills and loud noises offshore. It fueled rumors that the military was preparing for something not just in space, but here on Earth. The issue quickly became international. In Europe, the European Union called for data sharing and more transparency. China held an emergency meeting with its National Space Authority. Russia accused the United States of using Atlas as a reason to strengthen its space defenses. The global reaction grew tense. Stock markets dropped, airline routes changed, and protesters gathered outside NASA headquarters demanding the truth. Religious groups urged people to stay calm and pray. And then came a classified report to Congress that changed the tone completely. The report said only one thing: Atlas was not behaving like a rock. A room full of questions. On September 30th, senior military, intelligence, and scientific leaders gathered inside a secured conference room at Quantico. It was the highest-level emergency meeting held since the discovery of 3I Atlas. The tone was serious from the start. Charts and satellite imagery filled the screens, each one confirming the same alarming trend. Atlas's path toward the inner solar system was tightening. The probability of impact was now estimated at 47%, almost half. NASA analysts explained that the object was moving faster than expected and showed no signs of slowing down. Its current trajectory placed possible impact zones across several continents. No specific region could be confirmed as safe. The meeting quickly turned from analysis to action. The Department of Defense ordered coordination between the Navy, Space Force, and NASA to prepare for every scenario, including evacuation plans and potential deflection missions. Allied nations were briefed under strict confidentiality. Officials agreed that this was no longer a theoretical discussion. Every hour of delay reduced the chance of preventing disaster. As one intelligence report noted, the window for action was shrinking. By the end of the meeting, one conclusion was clear. Humanity's survival would depend on science, global cooperation, and time was running out. Debating the unthinkable. The September 30th meeting shifted from assessment to action. The data left no room for doubt. 3I Atlas posed a serious and potentially global threat. The question was no longer if humanity should respond, but how. Two primary strategies were discussed: deflection and mitigation. Both carried enormous risks. The deflection plan focused on changing Atlas's trajectory before it could reach Earth. NASA and Space Force teams presented updated models based on the DART mission, the 2022 test that successfully shifted the orbit of a small asteroid. But Atlas was far larger and moving much faster. To make any difference, multiple impactors would be needed, each heavier and more powerful than the original DART spacecraft. The idea was simple in theory. Strike the object with enough force to alter its course by even a small fraction of a degree. In practice, it meant coordinating dozens of launches with precision never before attempted. Engineers ran simulation after simulation, testing timing, impact angles, and velocity to determine what might actually work. Then came the nuclear discussion, a last resort measure that no one wanted to consider. Using nuclear explosives in space carried enormous political, environmental, and technical consequences. Even if it succeeded, there was no guarantee that Atlas would be destroyed completely. Breaking it apart could create hundreds of smaller fragments, each still capable of striking Earth. At the same time, mitigation planning began. Defense and emergency agencies started drafting protocols for mass evacuations, infrastructure protection, and supply chain support. Governments reviewed their continuity plans in case major cities were lost. The focus was beginning to shift from prevention to survival. For the first time, cooperation between nations became critical. Space agencies from Europe, Japan, and India offered data, expertise, and launch support. International working groups were formed to coordinate mission logistics and share satellite monitoring resources. By the end of the meeting, no single plan stood out as certain. Every option carried unprecedented risk, but inaction was no longer possible. The meeting closed with a single directive: begin immediate coordination on a deflection mission while preparing for the worst. The race to save the planet had officially begun. The Navy's secret protocols activated. By late summer, movements across the world's oceans hinted that something unusual was happening. Naval fleets shifted into tighter formations, radar networks ran at full capacity, and deep-sea communication cables transmitted continuous data streams to command centers in Washington. To the public, it looked like another round of global exercises. Behind the scenes, it was something far more serious. The United States Navy had quietly activated a classified series of emergency directives. These were not ordinary defense drills. They were legacy protocols first drafted during the Cold War, designed for one extraordinary scenario of contact with an unknown object of non-terrestrial origin. The procedures had been updated in the early 2000s, but never used. Until now. Intelligence reports began to reveal troubling patterns. Atlas's flight path was no longer stable. Small but deliberate-looking course corrections appeared in the data. Analysts could not explain how a comet, supposedly natural, could adjust its movement so precisely. Then came an even stranger correlation. Underwater listening stations in both the Atlantic and Pacific detected low-frequency signals each time Atlas emitted bursts of energy in space. The timing matched perfectly. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others were not so sure. The Navy expanded its monitoring grid. Submarines equipped with advanced sonar were deployed to key ocean regions, while carrier groups repositioned under new classified orders. Civilian satellite companies soon noticed interference on multiple communication bands, as secure military frequencies went dark. Inside the Pentagon, high-level discussions began under the code name Project Trident Watch. The question dividing officials was simple: observe or engage? Some argued that the signals were natural phenomena, a side effect of radiation or magnetic interaction. Others believed they could represent something intentional. No one could agree on what Atlas truly was, but one phrase kept appearing in restricted briefings: prepare for submersible entry. Whatever was approaching, the Navy was no longer looking only toward the sky. They were watching the oceans as well. Humanity's ace in the hole. Amid the rising tension, one success offered a spark of hope: the DART mission. In the year 2022, NASA crashed a spacecraft into an asteroid, proving that humanity could alter the path of a celestial body. The impact changed Dimorphos's orbit by more than 30 minutes, far beyond what scientists had expected. This real-world test turned theory into reality. For the first time, planetary defense was not just an idea. It worked. Now, planners began to imagine something far greater: a super DART, scaled up to match the size and speed of 3I Atlas. The challenge was enormous: bigger, faster, and farther than anything attempted before. But the principle was already proven. Humanity was not helpless. The DART mission became our blueprint, our secret weapon, our ace in the hole. We had practiced for this very moment. Science had given us a fighting chance. What began as an experiment had become the world's first line of defense: knowledge over panic. As the Pentagon meeting ended, the world outside was already reacting, but not how officials had hoped. The plan to release information carefully had collapsed before it began. Leaks, speculation, and half-truths spread faster than any official statement could keep up. In Washington, press conferences offered calm, measured words about ongoing analysis and no confirmed danger. But online, millions of people were already convinced that governments were hiding the truth. News networks ran conflicting headlines. Some promised reassurance. Others warned of global catastrophe. In Europe and Asia, markets began to fall. Panic buying surged in several cities. Shelves emptied of essentials as people tried to prepare for something they did not understand. At the same time, protests formed outside government buildings, demanding transparency. In some countries, emergency hotlines were flooded with calls about strange lights or sonic booms, none of which could be verified. Even the scientific community fractured. Some experts urged calm, reminding the public that impact probabilities were still being studied. Others openly criticized their governments for withholding data. The message was no longer unified. By the time an official statement was finally released, much of the world had already made up its mind. Some believed the threat was exaggerated. Others believed it was already too late. Humanity was united not by knowledge, but by confusion, a global divide between belief, fear, and denial. The closing crisis and unanswered questions. On November 12, 2025, 3I Atlas reached perihelion, the point closest to the Sun. For several weeks, Earth lost direct contact as intense solar radiation blinded telescopes and scrambled radio transmissions. Across every observatory, screens went dark. For scientists, it was a period of forced waiting and silent dread. When Atlas finally emerged from behind the sun, it was not where it was expected to be. The object's new position differed by several degrees from every previous model. NASA, the European Space Agency, and even classified military systems failed to explain how it had changed course. For the first time, experts could not agree on what they were observing. Inside the Pentagon and Navy command centers, tension escalated. Emergency protocols shifted from simulation to live response. Naval fleets moved to readiness posture across both the Atlantic and Pacific. Submarines adjusted to deeper patrol depths. The official explanation was routine monitoring. Few believed it. But what followed next was something no one could explain. For 3 full days, the Navy's deep-sea listening network, a global system of hydroacoustic sensors that tracks submarines and undersea activity, went completely silent. The constant low-frequency signals that had been detected in sync with Atlas's energy bursts vanished without warning. Analysts confirmed there was no system failure, no cable break, no maintenance. It was simply quiet. The silence spread through intelligence channels like a ghost signal. Data analysts replayed hours of recordings searching for any trace of interference, but nothing appeared. Some argued that Atlas had moved beyond the detection range. Others feared that it had done something far more deliberate, that it had stopped transmitting because it no longer needed to. The event was never made public. Only fragments of internal reports later surfaced online, claiming the Navy had classified the incident as Deep Signal Event Level 1. Officials denied the phrase existed. As weeks passed, the object continued to drift silently beyond visual range. Public attention waned. News cycles shifted. But inside military command, quiet monitoring continued around the clock. To this day, no one has explained what caused the 3 days of silence. Whether it was a system glitch, a physical event, or something intelligent, the mystery remains. What began as a study of a distant comet ended with a question humanity has never been ready to face. If something out there is watching, perhaps the silence was not the end of contact. Perhaps it was the beginning. Hundreds of officers, a secret meeting, and a threat no one can explain. The meeting may be over, but the questions remain. What did the generals see that forced an emergency call at this scale? Was it really about defense, or something the public is not ready to hear? Could 3I Atlas be more than science can explain? Share your thoughts in the comments and keep your eyes on the sky.